Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we are going way, way back to ancient Greece.
Always a good time to revisit the classics.
But we're adding a modern twist.
No.
Just imagine if Socrates, Plato, and all those guys, had Twitter accounts.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Well, we found this hilarious article that does exactly that.
Oh, wow.
It imagines what their tweets would be like, and it's seriously funny, but it also makes you think, right?
Yeah, I can see that. It's a fun way to explore their ideas.
Exactly. So we're going to dive into this article and see what kind of wisdom and snark these ancient philosophers would bring to the Twitterverse.
Let's do it. I'm ready to see what kind of philosophical burns they'd be dishing out.
Right. Okay, first up is Socrates, of course. And the article gives him the perfect Twitter handle, at @GadflySocrates.
That's so fitting. He was known for being a bit of a, gadfly, right? Always poking and prodding people with his questions.
Exactly. He wouldn't let anyone get away with easy answers. And one of his tweets in the article is, "I know that I know nothing."
Ugh. The classic Socratic paradox.
But then he adds, "But I'm pretty sure you know even less. #Socrates thoughts."
That's so Socrates. Self-aware, but with just a touch of intellectual superiority.
Right. It makes you wonder, though, if Socrates was on Twitter today, would he be like a viral sensation or constantly getting in trouble for, spreading this information? What do you think?
I mean, think about it. The heart of the Socratic method was asking questions,
Right.
provoking people to think critically about their own beliefs.
Right.
So in a way, Twitter's format, the back and forth, the limited characters, it kind of forces you to be concise and thought-provoking.
Huh. So maybe Twitter's actually the perfect platform for him.
In a way, yeah. It's like a digital agora, a public space for debate and discussion.
I love that. Okay, so the article also has Socrates tweeting about the oracle at Delphi.
Ah, the oracle, always a source of mystery and wisdom.
Right. And Socrates' tweet is, "Just had another chat with the oracle at Delphi. Apparently, I'm still the wisest man in Athens. Go figure." Shrug emoji. #humblebrag.
Oh, that is so good. Turning the oracle's profound declaration into, a casual humble brag.
It's perfect. And it shows that even though Socrates was considered wise, he didn't take himself too seriously.
Yeah, he had a sense of humor about it all, which is, I think, an important part of wisdom, right?
Definitely. Okay, the article also has Socrates tweeting out a challenge to his followers.
Ooh, a challenge. I like where this is going.
He says, "To all my followers, what is virtue?"
Classic philosophical question.
But then he adds, "Wrong answers only. #philosophy challenge."
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine the responses he'd get.
Right, but there's a method to the madness here.
Definitely. He's using humor to engage people, to get them thinking outside the box. By asking for wrong answers, he's challenging people to rethink their assumptions about what virtue even means.
So even in the Twitterverse, Socrates would still be a master teacher, using humor and provocation to make people think. All right, let's move on to Socrates' student, Plato.
Plato, the idealist, the philosopher king. What's his Twitter handle?
It's @idealformsforever.
Of course it is. It's perfect.
Right, it tells you everything you need to know about his philosophy.
Yeah, he was all about those ideal forms, those perfect concepts that exist beyond the physical world.
Right, and the article captures that perfectly with Plato's tweets. Like this one, "Just had a wild dream about a cave. Turns out we're all living in shadows." Mind-blown emoji. #allegory of the cave.
Okay, the allegory of the cave. Even I know about that one.
Right, it's one of his most famous ideas. But for those who haven't had the pleasure, what's it all about?
Well, imagine prisoners chained in a cave their whole lives. They can only see shadows projected on the wall, and they mistake those shadows for reality. But what if one prisoner escaped and saw the real world? The sunlight, the objects casting the shadows, that's what Plato's getting at. We're all kind of trapped in our limited perspectives, mistaking appearances for truth.
Whoa, that's kind of depressing. Are we just doomed to live in the shadows?
Not necessarily. That's where philosophy, where critical thinking comes in. The allegory of the cave is a challenge to question what we perceive as real, to seek deeper meaning and understanding.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So it's less about being literally stuck in a cave and more about breaking free from our mental limitations.
Exactly. And Plato doesn't stop there. The article has him tweeting, "Hot take, the physical world is just a poor copy of the realm of forms. Discuss. #Platonic realism."
I love how he's inviting debate, like a true philosopher.
Right. He's not just presenting an idea, he's engaging with the world, trying to spark a conversation.
It's so cool to see how this article turns Plato into this, online philosopher king, dropping truth bombs on Twitter and challenging everyone to step up their intellectual game.
Right. It shows how these ancient thinkers were engaging in the same kinds of discussions we have today, just in a different format. They were wrestling with big ideas, trying to make sense of the world, and they weren't afraid to stir things up a bit.
And speaking of stirring things up, Plato's got another tweet that's sure to spark some controversy. He says, "New rule for my ideal state.
Uh-oh, here we go.
No poets allowed. They're just too emotional. Sorry, not sorry. Hashtag Republic goals."
Oh, Plato, you and your disdain for poetry. It's a long-standing feud. But he had his reasons, you know.
I know. He was all about logic and reason.
Exactly. And he saw poetry as appealing to emotions, which he thought could be dangerous and disruptive to a well-ordered society. He wanted a society based on knowledge and wisdom, not on feelings and passions.
So he'd probably be the kind of guy who'd tweet logic over feelings, unironically.
Oh, totally. But it's interesting to think about why he valued logic so much.
Yeah.
He believed that reason was the path to truth, to understanding the world and ourselves. And in a way, he was trying to create a society that was free from the sway of irrationality and manipulation, which, is something we're still struggling with today.
Totally. It makes you think about how easily we can be swayed by, emotional appeals and fake news and all that stuff online. Maybe Plato was onto something with his emphasis on logic and critical thinking.
I think so, too. It's not that emotions are bad. It's just that it's important to be aware of how they can influence our judgments and to balance them with reason and evidence.
So a little bit of Plato's logic in our Twitter feeds might not be such a bad thing. All right, let's move on to Aristotle tweeting away at Stage Your Right Logic.
Aristotle, the master of logic and observation. I'm curious to see what he'd be tweeting about.
Well, he was Plato's student, but they definitely had their philosophical differences, right?
Oh, absolutely. Plato was all about the abstract, the ideal.
Yeah.
Aristotle, he was much more grounded in the physical world. He was all about observation and categorization. He literally categorized all the living things he could find.
And the article shows that with this tweet, just categorized all living things. Humans are apparently featherless bipeds. Take that, Plato. Hashtag taxonomy life.
Oh, that's classic Aristotle. So precise, so focused on defining things clearly.
And a little bit shady towards Plato. Right.
Well, it's a reference to a funny story where Diogenes the Cynic supposedly plucked a chicken and presented it to Plato as Plato's man, mocking his definition of humans as featherless bipeds.
Oh, wait, seriously. Someone actually did that.
Oh, yeah. Those ancient Greek philosophers, they didn't hold back.
That's amazing. It sounds like they were always trolling each other. Okay, so what else is Aristotle tweeting about?
His next tweet is classic Aristotle, golden mean people. Virtue is the middle ground between extremes.
The golden mean.
Right. But then he adds, except for my tweets, they're always excellent. Hashtag Aristotelian ethics.
Oh, he's got jokes. I love it.
Yeah, it shows that even though he was all about balance and moderation, he also had a sense of humor and maybe a little bit of a healthy ego, which you need on Twitter, right?
Yeah, totally. Okay, one last tweet from Aristotle before we move on. He says, poll, what's the best form of government? A, monarchy. B, aristocracy. C, constitutional government. D, all of the above, but they can all suck too.
Huh. Seems like Aristotle was a bit cynical about politics.
Yeah, well, he did live in ancient Greece. I can't imagine politics was all that fun back then either.
Right. But it shows that he was a realist. He understood that no system of government is perfect and that they all have their flaws.
It makes you wonder what he'd think of our political landscape today. I bet he'd have a field day on Twitter debating the pros and cons of different systems.
Oh, absolutely. He'd be right in there throwing out logic bombs and challenging people's assumptions. Okay, so we've covered Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Who's next on our philosophical Twitter tour?
Well, we can't talk about ancient Greek philosophy without mentioning Diogenes the Cynic.
Ah, yes, Diogenes, the original mentalist, the guy who lived in a barrel and told Alexander the Great to get out of his sunlight. What's his Twitter handle, I wonder?
@CynicalDog, of course.
Perfect. It's so him. I can only imagine the snarky tweets he'd be putting out there.
Right. The article imagines him tweeting, living in a barrel, peeing on statues, and heckling Plato. Just another Tuesday. Hashtag living my best life.
Huh. That's so Diogenes. He really knew how to live life on his own terms, even if it meant going against all social conventions.
That's like he was a proto-influencer, but instead of promoting products, he was promoting a philosophy of radical simplicity and rejecting societal norms.
Exactly. He believed in living in accordance with nature, stripping away all the unnecessary luxuries and social expectations that he saw as distractions from true happiness.
It's funny because in a way he's kind of like a minimalist influencer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except instead of perfectly curated Instagram photos of his, capsule wardrobe, he'd be posting grainy pics of himself hanging out in his barrel.
Totally. Maybe with a witty caption like, "This is my influencer house, you jealous?" Hashtag barrel life.
Oh, I love it. He'd definitely be all about authenticity and rejecting consumerism.
Okay, so the article also imagines that famous encounter between Diogenes and Alexander the Great playing out on Twitter.
Oh, yeah, the one where Alexander asks Diogenes if there's anything he can do for him.
Right, and Diogenes tells him to stop blocking his sunlight.
Yep. So how do they imagine that on Twitter?
Well, Diogenes tweets at Alexander the Great, "Stand out of my sunlight, you poser." Hashtag Diogenes eats Alexander. Can you imagine that trending?
Oh, it would break the internet. Here you have Alexander the Great, the most powerful man in the world, and Diogenes, who literally lives in a barrel, is not impressed at all.
It's such a great example of how Diogenes wasn't afraid to challenge authority, to speak truth to power, even if it meant being a little, well, rude.
Yeah, he was definitely not one to mince words. And it makes you think about how we often defer to people in positions of power, even if they don't deserve our respect. Diogenes would have been like, nope, I'm calling you out no matter who you are.
He'd be the ultimate Twitter troll, but with a philosophical purpose.
Exactly. He'd be using his platform to provoke us, to make us question our values and assumptions.
All right, let's move on from the cynical world of Diogenes and see what Epicurus is tweeting about. He's got the handle at Pleasure Principle, which sounds a little, maybe a bit hedonistic.
Yeah, well, Epicurus was all about pleasure, but not in the way we might think today. For him, true pleasure was about tranquility, living a life free from pain and anxiety.
So less about indulging in every whim and more about finding contentment and peace of mind.
Exactly. He believed that the simple things in life, like friendship, good conversation, and just being present in the moment, were the true sources of happiness.
The article has him tweeting, "Pro tip, true happiness comes from simple pleasures, good friends, and freedom from fear. Also wine, lots of wine." Yeah. Hashtag Epicurean lifestyle.
Ah, now that's a philosophy I can get behind.
Right. Wine and friends. Sign me up.
Yeah, but I think the key here is that Epicurus wasn't advocating for mindless indulgence. He was more about appreciating the simple things and cultivating a sense of gratitude.
Okay, so what else is Epicurus tweeting about? His next tweet is, "Don't fear death. When we exist, death is not. And when death exists, we are not." Hashtag death positivity.
Whoa, that's deep.
Right. It's like he's dropping some serious wisdom in 280 characters or less.
And it's actually a core tenet of Epicureanism. He believed we shouldn't fear death because it's simply the absence of sensation. When we're alive, death isn't present, and when we die, we no longer exist to experience it. So no need to worry.
It's a very logical approach to something that, a lot of people are afraid of.
Right. And it's a good reminder to focus on living a fulfilling life in the present rather than dwelling on what might happen after we die.
Okay, last tweet from Epicurus before we move on. He says, "Just started my new philosophy garden retreat. Come for the discussions, stay for the cheese and wine. Hashtag philosophy and chill."
So he's like hosting a philosophical wine and cheese party.
Very much. He actually did have a garden where he and his followers would hang out and discuss philosophy.
It sounds like a lovely way to spend an evening, honestly. Good company, stimulating conversation, and delicious snacks. What more could you ask for?
Right. Okay, let's switch gears and get a dose of stoicism from Zeno of Citium, tweeting at Stoicsen. Now, I know stoicism is all about self-control and resilience, but is it really possible to achieve that kind of inner peace in today's world, especially on Twitter, where everyone seems to be losing their minds all the time?
That's a great question, and it's probably one that Zeno would address head-on in his tweets. The article imagines him tweeting, "Got cut off in traffic today, reminded myself it's out of my control, instant tranquility, hashtag stoic mindset."
So it's about accepting what you can't change and focusing on what you can.
Exactly. Stoicism is about recognizing that a lot of things in life are outside of our control, and that the only thing we can truly control is our own thoughts and actions.
It's like a mental toolkit for navigating the chaos of the world, right? Instead of getting swept up in the drama, you take a step back, assess the situation, and choose how you want to respond.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a sense of inner peace that's not dependent on external circumstances. And Zeno wouldn't just preach this philosophy, he'd embody it in his tweets. The article has him tweeting, "Remember, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Hashtag Xenowisdom.
It's like a mini motivational speech in a tweet. I love it. And it's so relevant to our lives today, especially with all the negativity and drama that we're constantly bombarded with online.
Totally. Xeno would be all about reminding us that we have the power to choose how we react to things, even on Twitter.
And the article even has him joking about the challenges of applying Stoic principles in a world that's constantly trying to pull us in different directions. He tweets, "Poll, what's harder? A, controlling your emotions. B, explaining people you're not talking about Zeno's paradoxes."
That's great. So, wait, Zeno's paradoxes, what are those?
Oh, yeah. Zeno is also known for his paradoxes, which are basically thought experiments that explore the nature of infinity and motion. Like, there's one about Achilles and the tortoise.
The one where Achilles can never overtake the tortoise in a race.
Exactly. Because he has to keep catching up to where the tortoise was, but the tortoise is always moving ahead, even if it's just a little bit.
Right. It's mind-bending stuff. But it shows that Zeno was interested in pushing the boundaries of logic and questioning our assumptions about how the world works.
It's like he's saying, hey, even the things that seem obvious, maybe they're not so simple after all.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a good reminder to stay curious, to keep asking questions, and to never stop challenging our own understanding of the world.
Okay, I think I need a break from paradoxes for a minute. Let's move on to someone who's known for being a bit more enigmatic. Heraclitus, tweeting at everything flows.
Heraclitus, huh? Now there's a philosopher who knew how to turn a phrase.
Right. He's the one who said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice."
Deep stuff. I have a feeling his Twitter feed would be full of those kind of cryptic pronouncements.
Well, the article imagines him tweeting, "You can't step in the same river twice, unless it's the river Styx.
Ooh, a River Styx reference.
Then you can't step in it, even once." Hashtag deep thoughts.
Wow. He's got jokes. I wouldn't have pegged Heraclitus as a comedian.
Right. It's that classic Heraclitus blend of profound insight and dark humor.
Yeah, I get the river metaphor, it's about change, how everything is in constant flux.
Right.
But the river Styx, that's the river that leads to the underworld in Greek mythology. He's adding another layer there.
Ooh, I see. He's saying, sure, everything changes, but some things only happen once, like, death.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that even in a world of constant change, some things are final.
Okay, what else is Heraclitus tweeting about? This one's good. Everything changes and nothing stands still.
Okay, getting a little repetitive, Heraclitus.
But then he adds, except my follower count, that's depressingly stable. Hashtag philosophical burns.
He's roasting himself. I love it. It's like he's acknowledging that even his own philosophy of constant change can feel, a little at odds with the way things are sometimes.
Yeah, it's like he's poking fun at the fact that we can be so aware of the impermanence of everything, and yet some things just seem to stay the same, no matter what.
Maybe Heraclitus is more relatable than we thought. Okay, one last tweet from Heraclitus before we move on.
Right.
And this one is a real head-scratcher. The way up and the way down are one and the same, just like the quality of my tweets. Hashtag consistently confusing.
Okay, I'm officially lost.
That's Heraclitus for you. Always leaving us with more questions than answers. But, I think that's kind of the point. He wants us to think, to wrestle with these ideas, even if we don't fully understand them.
I guess that's part of the fun of philosophy, right? It's not always about finding neat and tidy answers.
Right. Sometimes it's about embracing the mystery, the ambiguity. Okay, so we've talked about the philosophers who are all about words and ideas.
Right.
But what about the numbers, guys?
Well, the article doesn't disappoint. Next up is Pythagoras, tweeting at Triangle Guy.
Of course. The OG math influencer? I wonder what kind of content he'd be putting out there.
Well, the article imagines him tweeting A plus B plus B BSC.
The Pythagorean theorem. Had to get that one in there.
But then he adds, but have you ever wondered why? The answer will SHOCKU, link in bio. Hashtag Pythagorean mystery.
I can totally see him with a YouTube channel explaining math concepts with cool graphics and dramatic music.
Totally. And he'd probably have a whole merch line too, right? T-shirts with the Pythagorean theorem, mugs with geometric patterns.
Oh yeah, he'd be all over that.
Okay, but there's one thing that always throws me off about Pythagoras.
What's that?
The whole bean thing.
Oh yeah, the bean ban. That's a weird one.
The article even has him tweeting about it. He says, friendly reminder, don't eat beans. They might be your reincarnated grandma. Hashtag Pythagorean diet.
It's one of the most bizarre aspects of Pythagoreanism, for sure. They believed in reincarnation, the transmigration of souls, and for whatever reason, they decided that eating beans was a big no-no.
I mean, I love beans, but I've never thought of them as potential reincarnated relatives. That's a whole new level of food consciousness.
Right. It just goes to show that even the most brilliant minds can have some pretty strange ideas. Okay, one last tweet from Pythagoras before we wrap things up.
Okay, hit me with it.
He says, "Just discovered the music of the spheres. Dropping my celestial mixtape soon. Stay tuned." Music notes emoji, star emoji, hashtag cosmic beats.
Ooh, now we're talking. I'd definitely listen to that mixtape.
Right. It's a reference to the Pythagorean idea of the harmony of the spheres, this concept that the movements of celestial bodies create a kind of like musical harmony that's inaudible to human ears.
It's a beautiful idea. It makes you wonder if Pythagoras was like a musician in his spare time.
He probably was. I mean, the guy was obsessed with numbers and patterns. Music is all about that too. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We've seen how some of the greatest minds in history might have used the modern platform of Twitter to share their ideas, their insights, and even their jokes.
It's been so much fun. And it really makes you think, right?
Totally. It shows that philosophy isn't just this, like, dusty old subject that's irrelevant to our lives. It's alive and well, and it can be funny, it can be engaging, and it can even be found in the most unexpected places, like Twitter.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of ancient Greek philosophy, we have one question for you. Which philosopher's Twitter account would you follow, and why? Let us know in the comments.
That's a tough one. They're all so interesting in their own ways.
Thanks for joining us on this philosophical adventure. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep those tweets coming.